Good afternoon and welcome to the Humboldt County Association of Governments September 19th, 2024. And we will call this meeting to order. Can we get a roll call?
Chair Johnson,
Here.
Mayor Jones,
Here.
Supervisor Madrone,
Present.
Mayor Pro Tem Castellano,
Here.
Councilmember Atkins Salazar,
Here.
Councilmember Jorgensen,
Here.
Councilmember West,
Here.
Councilmember Orr,
Here online.
Pack Member Arroyo, Pack Member Allstrand.
Here.
Thank you. And our first order of business is to adjourn as the HCOG board and convene as the Policy Advisory Committee. And at this time, do we have any public comment on non-agenda items? Seeing none, we have a proclamation for the week without driving. And I will read that, and I believe we have Juliana Harris to accept that. And Humboldt County Association of Governments Board of Directors recognizing September 30th through October 6, 2024 as the week without driving. Whereas access to mobility is a fundamental part of health and community connection, allowing Humboldt County residents to reach education, employment opportunities, medical services, shopping, recreation, and visit friends and family. And whereas everyday Americans who can't drive, approximately a third of the population, that includes people with disabilities, young people, seniors, and people who can't afford cars or gas, face significant barriers to mobility, such as inadequate sidewalks, lack of access to transit, lack of connectivity, and dangerous roads. And whereas the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics estimates that the cost of owning a car is approximately 72 cents a mile, with average household spending on transportation reaching $10,961 a year in 2021, many people cannot afford the cost of a car, and nearly a third of the people residing in the U.S. do not have a driver's license, either because of their age or a condition that does not allow them to drive. And whereas transportation represents the largest source of greenhouse gas emissions in the United States, and in order to meet our state's greenhouse gas emission reduction goals, we must reduce emissions in our transportation sector. And whereas in addition to greenhouse gas emissions, cars also create tire dust that can enter watersheds, have necessitated freeway expansions that have been detrimental to neighborhoods that are historically home to communities of color, and require impervious surfaces for parking, with an estimated 3.4 parking spaces for every car in the United States, all of which have contributed to transportation being an important environmental justice concern. And whereas the Week Without Driving is an educational campaign that invites elected officials and other decision makers and community members to experience their community without relying on a car. And whereas going a week without driving is a great way to understand how we can improve our current transportation system to better meet the needs of the citizens in our region and improve and enhance transportation options such as transit, biking, and walking pathways as key strategies in our decarbonization efforts. Now, therefore, be it resolved that HCOG Board hereby proclaims September 30 through October 6, 2024 as the Week Without Driving, and encourages all people in our region in this special observance.
Thank you, Chair Johnson. I'd like to introduce Juliana Harris. Juliana is a longstanding member of HCOG's Social Service Technical Advisory Council. She is also the Assistive Technology Coordinator at Tri-County's Independent Living, and she's also a person who lives with low vision. So, Juliana, thank you for being here, and thank you for your service on the stack.
Thank you for having me, and I appreciate it. I just want to say for me, every day is a day without driving, because I can't see well. And I just know how important it is to be able to rely on transportation. I think that we're privileged in this area to have so many options. We have buses and paratransit and Uber and Lyft the work, of folks like the stack is to help meet unmet transit needs so that more people can have access to get where they need to go. And I rely on family and friends to get around. And I just think that, being here and experiencing, the world without driving, lets me know that I can get most places, reliably, and that's huge. There's still some outskirts that you can't quite get to on the transit, but they're getting better at that. They're working harder at that. And I just encourage, folks to try to maybe catch the bus or get an Uber to work, switch it up a little bit and see what folks with disabilities have to do on a daily basis because they can't drive, and also save a tree because ride sharing is helps with the emissions, and it's just a really important thing, I think, to acknowledge and to give it a try. Maybe you can't make the full week, but maybe do a day, but just give it a shot, and just kind of you get a perspective from the other person's viewpoint. So thank you.
Thank you. And we'll see if we have any public comment on this proclamation item. And I don't see anyone. So we will move on to...
Could I make a comment?
Oh, yeah.
Mr. Chair? Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you so much for bringing this forward for us. And like you said, I think probably for a lot of us doing a whole week is somewhat difficult, especially as public officials with all our meeting requirements. But to do a day here and there, and I have to say that the Zoom platform has actually made it more possible for me to not drive on several days a week, and I'm very grateful to that, technology improvement. But we've had a lot of protests over the last year around investments in oil and war and things all over the planet, and so every day we don't drive, in a way we're divesting from those things that actually create wars on our planet for energy and oil. So it's one of those ways that we each individually can start trying to divest ourselves here and there as we can. So I just want to thank you very much for your efforts and for bringing this forward.
All right, thank you. Any other? Okay. Well, at this time, we will move to our action items. The Regional Climate Action Plan comment.
Yeah, thank you. This item is about the draft Regional Climate Action Plan, and we have kind of three pieces to this item this evening. And the first is to receive a report from Humboldt County Planning Director John Ford about the draft Regional Climate Action Plan, kind of the process and the status of that, and then to give some direction to staff on exploring HCOG's involvement in the Climate Action Plan's implementation, and then also to discuss the letter that was provided with your packet, including the supplemental version of that letter that was provided this afternoon. And, if there's any clarification you'd like me to make to that letter, and essentially a vote to go ahead and send that off. So with that, I turn it over to Director Ford to give us the presentation, and then we can discuss the HCOG items following that.
Thank you, Ms. Burks. It is a pleasure to be here. Good afternoon. First, I want to say I really appreciate your staff, and it's always a pleasure to work with Beth and with Amy. So I'm here I work for the County of Humboldt, obviously, but I'm really here to represent a regional effort, and that's represented on the slide. That there's a lot of cities and organizations that have been involved in putting this together, and so I'm not here just from the county. I'm really here from the region, and truly appreciate that. So you'll recall, many of you have heard this presentation probably already. I know several cities have already taken action on this, and so I will try to be brief so as to not be too redundant. But this effort as a regional effort does go back to 2019. We had a draft prepared in 2022. We realized that draft was not going to reach the status of a qualified cap, which would not meet either the objectives of the grant work or the grant that had been provided to allow us to prepare the cap, or to provide CEQA streamlining, which every jurisdiction really wanted. And that cap, also that draft, did something a little different than what we're doing now, is that it identified greenhouse gas emissions by jurisdiction. So in this particular slide, the pie chart that you see on the right, the big blue portion of it, that would be the unincorporated area of the county. The green area would be Arcata, the yellow area would be Eureka, and then Trinidad, Rio del Fortuna, Ferndale, Blue Lake, and a small unallocated area are then reflected in the remainder of that pie chart. So we refocused what we were doing and redid the contract that we had with the EIR consultant to modify the climate action plan. And the primary objective was really to reach a qualified cap status, to be able to have a cap that could be implemented with measures that were achievable and something that would be meaningful for the entire community. That began in October of 2023. We have now obviously finished that draft and are beginning the work on the EIR. The redrafting of the cap began with doing a 2022 GHG emissions inventory. This was slightly actually much different than the previous inventory that was done, as this was done for the entire region. And it was done by emission type. And you can see in the Humboldt County region, and when I say Humboldt County, I'm not just talking about the unincorporated area, I'm talking about the whole region. So forgive me for that reference. I feel a little self-conscious about that. But you see the big blue area there, that is the on-road transportation being 73% of the emissions in 2022. That's followed by building use for heating and basically using gas, followed by off-road equipment. One of the interesting things is building electricity is fairly small, and that's because one of the great benefits that this community enjoys is RCEA, and so much of our electricity is already renewable, and so there wasn't a huge generation of greenhouse gases associated with that. So the other thing that the previous draft did was that it kind of grouped both the rural areas of the county, which would include the smaller cities, and the very rural portions of Humboldt County in with the more urbanized areas. And so this draft actually details the differences between what can be accomplished in an urban environment versus a rural environment, and that is something we're working on. We've received comments on that and working on defining that better. But this draft did something very important that I'm going to say about 3 times during this presentation, is that it's recommending as a priority measure is to establish a regional climate committee. And that regional climate committee would be responsible for implementing the climate action plan. And there's various reasons for that I will get into in a moment. But I did want to just say some of the results of the background analysis of what the current emissions are. In order to comply with state regulations, we have to have a 40% reduction by 2030 and an 85% reduction, or to get what's called net zero by 2045. So this chart shows what our 1990 emissions were, and that's using the 2022 emissions analysis and using a state accepted protocol to do something called backcasting to get back to that. So that's what that top line, that dotted line, is what the 1990 emissions are. The blue line that says adjusted forecast is what basically our current emissions projection would be if we did nothing right now other than to follow existing state regulations. So you can see that that already has brought that down quite a bit just by implementing what the state's already done. Our goal is that line that sharply goes down, and you can see that in 2030 the target is to go from 1.5 million tons of CO2 down to 1.2, and then by 2045 to get down to not emitting any greenhouse gas. So the way that the RCAP is structured, the Regional Climate Action Plan, is to develop strategies, goals, and actions. The actions are the items that are actually quantified because they identify how much greenhouse gas reductions are associated with taking those actions. The goals and strategies are intended to be supportive and to move us forward in understanding the items that really need to be addressed. So the key focus areas are focusing on use of renewable energy, and that's a continued focus. The building electrification, decarbonization of new and existing buildings, reducing vehicle miles traveled. It's interesting that the previous proclamation was given just before this presentation because that is a key component of this. And then organic waste diversion, and something that we can't take advantage of right now, which is sequestration, but want to be able to follow coming out of the 2030 year is to have a protocol and a procedure for quantifying how much sequestration really occurs in Humboldt County, because frankly, we probably sequester more carbon than we emit. The state just hasn't given us a way to take advantage of that in a climate action plan yet. So one of the measures, one of the actions is to really develop a study and a protocol to then begin to quantify that so that we can take advantage of that. And that's really one of the primary strategies to getting to net zero. So the Regional Climate Committee is a high priority of this, and there's a couple reasons for that. One is that it gives regional accountability, that we're all working together in this. It's not up to the individual jurisdictions to do everything themselves. That allows us, puts us in a better position to be able to apply for grants. As many of you probably are aware, a lot of the grantors right now really look for collaboration, look for partnerships in undertaking grant opportunities, and this is collaborative by design because it is the whole region coming together and acting as one. It would create a program manager, and this could be, and this is a presentation that I've given before, it could be an existing or a new joint powers agreement. I just want to take a segue for a moment and say one of the great strengths of Humboldt County in this region is that there's several JPAs that are doing significant work that really are involved in accomplishing greenhouse gas reductions. And that's something that is powerful and sets us up to succeed. So one of the things I do want to just also say, and Ms. Burke's already mentioned this, is that the possibility of an existing JPA or organization being used to implement the Regional Climate Action Plan. And HCOG has been coming up more and more and more. And I have felt a little sheepish about that because nobody's talked to you yet, or at least formally. And so I did want to mention that to you as you consider this, that at least from my perspective, there's a lot of feedback that HCOG would really be the ideal place for this to go. In fact, ran into a city council person earlier today who mentioned to me, it's like, I just hope it's HCOG. So I'll stop that lobbying effort right there and move on. So I just wanted to give you a short update on the status. We're currently taking comments on the document itself on the RCAP. And that's going through September 20th. That was the deadline that we gave, but we're moving that out a little bit just to make sure people have the opportunity to comment. And then the notice of preparation for the EIR was issued on August 30th, and that goes through September 30th of 2024. And so the EIR is underway. We expect that draft to be on the street in spring of 2025 with adoption in June of 2025. And I think that would be the end of the presentation. Thank you for your patience, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you. And do we have any questions, comments from the board?
So thank you for your presentation. This is a very important issue for our whole country. I know that there are probably other regions that have one of these climate committees. Have we got a template for that from other cities and counties that are, especially the county and region that are our size?
We are looking, evidently there is a similar style committee that's in Sonoma County. So we are looking into that to see how they've structured their work. One of the drawbacks of that, unfortunately, is their climate action plan was litigated. And so we hope to avoid that.
Thank you.
Councilmember Atkins Salazar.
Yeah, I was just going to say that I have been approached about this as a representative for HCOG in the past, in the recent past. And from my perspective, it would be a privilege for our JPA to be able to be a part of this. And I think it would be a good fit, of course, if staff feels like that's something that, can be accomplished. I'm in support of that.
Supervisor Madrone.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I too think that HCOG would be a great fit. And I want to thank you, John, for your work with the cities and our partners to do this. And I'm hoping that we can actually transfer this cooperation to sea level rise regional planning as well, because that's going to require cities and counties also to work cooperatively together. And on the sequestration part, I too look forward to the equations or the calculations that will allow for the credit for the amazing sequestration we get from our forests, as well as our wetlands and ag lands. I mean, all of this is, bringing in a lot of carbon and storing it. But what I don't want to see is this net thing where we go, well, we're storing a million tons, so therefore we can use 1 million tons, and therefore we're net zero. What I'd love to see is 1 million tons in the negative, so to speak, beyond net. That we don't just use that as a way to say, well, we can continue to emit. Ideally, we bring our emissions down to zero and we're storing all kinds of carbon. But there's a lot of work to do to get there. But I just wanted to share that thought in regards to how we're moving forward. And I look forward to the next phases of this where the committee's formed and we figure out how we're going to enforce these things. And as I've said to you many times, ideally, there will be so many incentives, positive, financial, and other incentives embedded into this system to where we don't have to enforce much. The incentives are so strong financially and morally that it encourages all the right actions to occur. And that's going to be the way it becomes really successful versus just a hammer, lots of carrots, right? And I know you know that, John, so just want to put that out there. So.
And Mayor Pro Tem Castellano.
Thank you. Also, we did have a presentation on the CAP on Tuesday at the Eureka City Council meeting, and I believe council members across the board spoke favorably of HCOG's already in all of the work that's already been happening. And thank you to the board here and to staff, through HCOG in terms of climate resilience and adaptation around housing and transit planning. And so, generally, people in Eureka at the council level, we're thinking that HCOG could be a good fit, without pressuring you to take on something that isn't in your capacity. I mean, and for sure there's support around supporting staffing for that and things like that. One of the things that came up at our meeting that I had a question about, just to hear another perspective on it, is that with the collaborative CAP, there wouldn't be the same kind of requirements for individual jurisdictions to have distinct measurements for their kind of their participation. Of course, on Tuesday we discussed, well, we still want to do our share, or and whatever that means. But I would just be curious to hear other people's perspectives on that kind of shift between jurisdictional caps versus regional caps.
Sure. So one of the interesting things about a collaborative environment, especially where there's a regional climate committee made up of elected officials of all the jurisdictions, is that basically all the jurisdictions are involved. And so looking out for that. So one of the benefits here too is that there are many smaller jurisdictions that wouldn't really be able to implement something like this. So as the larger jurisdictions would implement things, they'd be getting left out without being given any benefit to what a cap can do. Implementing it at the regional level, a lot of the grant work and a lot of the things that need to happen with, say, public transportation, charging stations, conversion to EVs, that can be more effectively done on a regional basis, giving priority to certain locations rather than on a jurisdiction by jurisdiction basis. And so that's the thinking behind this, is that it allows the region to acquire grant funding to do things at a much larger level and a broader scale than individual jurisdictions trying to take it on themselves. In terms of new development, there will be a checklist that identifies what compliance with the cap looks like. And so in order to get the streamlining benefit of the cap, all development would need to comply with that. That would be implemented by the local jurisdictions.
And thank you. That makes a lot of sense. I think the question is more about how do we, will we be asking jurisdictions to kind of make pledges? Maybe those aren't punitive, or they're not sticks, but also just sort of like, is there some anticipation on how we're going to ask the jurisdictions to partner in the regional,
That's not completely defined, but I think the basic and maybe too simplistic of an idea is that simply by having representation sitting on the Regional Climate Committee and then taking that back to the individual jurisdictions, it's like, here's what we're doing as a region. And there are several ordinances, for instance, that are identified as implementation measures. And so it would be the expectation that those ordinances would get adopted by everybody. One of the possibilities is that some of the different jurisdictions could write the ordinance for everybody, and then it could be adopted by the individuals. If a jurisdiction chose not to do that, it may not be the end of the world, because this is, again, being implemented on a regional basis. So the critical thing is to think regionally and what the overall trajectory is, thinking back to that chart that showed the 1990 baseline, showed business as usual, and then showed the goals. The main thing is to stay on the trajectory of where the goals are. And as long as that's being done as a region, we're on track to comply with the RCAP.
Yeah, if I could provide an example also, because at HCOG, we're typically going after grants that are regional in nature. And one great example that we were just recently awarded was the Safe Streets and Roads for All, a regional Vision Zero action plan. And the way that worked is, and kind of, you can just imagine this process playing out for a variety of grants, but we take that to the TAC, so our Technical Advisory Committee, and we say, hey, we want to go after this. This is how much match we're going to need. This is the benefit this could provide. And we really work with each jurisdiction to figure out what kind of resources they can put towards that. Is it a cash match? Is it in kind? What kind of staffing do they have available? What kind of facilities could they donate for public meetings? We really kind of go to that granular level with each jurisdiction to figure out what is going to be reasonable, for them to do, that we could actually meet that and know that we can rely on that as we go through grant implementation. So we've had great success with that model. And I think, I kind of picture that playing out again and again as grant opportunities come up, really just working, with each individual jurisdiction to see what they can do.
I just wanted to say I was newly elected in 2020, so this is all rather new for me. And one of the first things that really stuck out to me was the collaboration and how well people work together. I was really blown away at that amount, and even here serving on this board, the times when there are things that are available and the generosity of some of the bigger cities looking out for the smaller ones that might not be able to get those, and just the sharing, and it's been pretty impressive. So I'm pretty confident we can do it. It sounds like it's peer pressure is the way that we'll be doing this. So, but yeah, so I think Humboldt County does it from what I've seen. It's been very impressive how everyone works together. So.
Yes, Supervisor Madrone.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As you know, John, I mean, in the RCEA portfolio, there's biomass, and it's currently considered renewable, but there's a lot of controversy around that, as you know, and RCEA has dealt with some pretty big hearings in the last year in regards to all that. Part of that is the industrial approach to biomass conversion that requires a tremendous amount of fossil fuel use to get the biomass to the plant. And we have an old plant in Scotia that has a lot of issues with emissions. The technology has improved dramatically. So a new plant would not have as many of those issues. But there's been a tremendous amount of technological advances in mobile biomass conversion, where we have curtain burners and electric plants that can be taken out to the forest areas where the forest health work is occurring. That reduces that fossil fuel footprint dramatically. And of course, we always have the need for workforce development and jobs. And so once we are able to calculate our sequestration, the only way that actually works is if we protect the forest from completely burning up and emitting millions of tons of material all at once in these big fires. And we're seeing the lightning belt shift further west, around Willow Creek, versus it used to mostly be Hayfork, Weaverville, and now it's shifted a lot further into Humboldt County. So I think, lots of plans around grant monies and other sources of funding for workforce development and doing all that forest health work, not clear cutting, but, thinning, limbing, and then doing mobile biomass conversion as we do that. All of those things are really great possible solutions to taking what our current biomass conversion looks like to something that's even better in terms of emissions and protections for that sequestration and stuff. So, and we've talked about that before as well. So just a couple thoughts there. But again, a lot of that's going to come out of further steps in the plan as we detail all of those opportunities.
Right.
Thank you.
Well, we have nothing. When you and I chatted a little bit, you might want to hit on some of those points.
Yeah,
too.
great. Thank you. Yeah, we have a couple of different, I'm looking for a direction on a couple items. So first is, kind of hearing loud and clear that there may be support for exploring HCOG being the JPA that would, be the Regional Climate Committee. And so just want to confirm that you're giving direction to staff to look into that, to continue coordinating with the regional partners. What would that look like? How would we support it? I think a lot of our work already, is implementing, and one of the tables you received in your staff report is kind of showing all the different implementation measures that we are already working on here at HCOG. So we're sort of starting before the document goes live, but it's completely consistent with our regional transportation plan in terms of reducing carbon emissions from the transportation sector. So wanted to confirm that that's direction, and what would happen really, what our hope is that, before the EIR is adopted, so that, the plan is in place, whether this lands at HCOG or another JPA, that by the time this plan is, the EIR is adopted and this plan is going live, we are not then figuring out how we're going to implement it, but we spend, the same time as the EIR is being considered, really figuring out how we want to move forward with supporting the committee and supporting the staffing that we need to staff that committee. So the direction would be to send me off to, kind of keep coordinating and figuring out what that might look like, what HCOG resources are needed, and what kind of commitments we could get from the other jurisdictions. The other thing that is part of a vote tonight is the letter that was provided. This would become a comment letter. As Director Ford had the slide, we're in a couple different comment periods right now. So this would be HCOG's essentially official comment. And I did provide a revised version of the letter. We received some feedback on one particular item on this letter, and I want to spend some time talking about that. And that is that within our regional transportation plan, we have safe and sustainable transportation targets. And we spend a lot of time going after funds to implement these targets. They have everything to do with mode shift, safety on our transportation system, converting to zero emission vehicles. A lot of the same topics that you find in the draft RCAP. And one thing we've noticed is that the safe and sustainable transportation targets are often more ambitious than the numbers that went into the RCAP. And some concern in public meetings has been raised about that. I will say that our safe and sustainable transportation targets, they really set a vision for our optimal transportation system. They do a lot more than just reduce carbon emissions. We're really articulating, if we had all the mode choices we wanted, if we were all getting around as safely as we possibly could, what would that transportation system look like? So they really serve a different purpose. We also never did any analysis on the specific amount of greenhouse gas reductions that would come with each of those targets. Again, we were articulating this optimal transportation condition. They were based on scientific information, best available, but it wasn't quantified in that way, and we didn't take that step. And it was never intended to allow for streamlining the way this qualified cap would allow streamlining. It was really for a different purpose. And I will say that the safe and sustainable transportation targets have been very powerful in attracting all the grant funds. You've been seeing coming through here recently as we've been amending our OWP to include these additional funding sources. So we want to make sure that it's known that we still are going to be working towards those safe and sustainable transportation targets. And we really don't see that as a conflict with these numbers that are coming out of the RCAP. Again, with these two sort of different purposes. And so we will still be full steam ahead. We do get the benefit of updating our regional transportation plan every 4 years, which is coming right up. I know it seems like we just did it, but we'll be doing it again. So we can reevaluate this as well. Is there parts that we need to sync up a little more? Do we have more available information because the RCAP is adopted? We can take a look at that, but certainly in the meantime, and we'll be full steam ahead in the safe and sustainable targets, just as they are in terms of the funding we're going after. So that was just something we wanted to make a little more clear in the letter. So that's what the revisions you received are. And so I'd be happy to take any questions on the letter, but that's kind of what we're looking for tonight is the direction on should we continue to explore, which is also in the letter. So if that's not a direction, then we need to change that part. But so just want that vote and make sure it's clear that I'll come back in a couple months with a plan.
All right. Well, I think we're at the point we could definitely explore this and look at how it would work. Supervisor Madrone, you had something?
Yeah, just I think there might be a typo here in the letter. But what I hear is two actions. One, supporting staff to investigate, as you detailed out. Two, to support the letter. On page 2, in the middle of the page, in that underlined paragraph, second sentence, therefore the RTP environmental impact report and subsequent addendums do not provide sufficient, I think it's do not, if I'm correct, so.
Thank you. And we've actually posted that revision, but it didn't make it in your version. But thank you very much.
Okay, no problem. That's it.
Any other board comments or questions? See none.
I would move then that
Well, we have public comment. Yes, Colin.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Colin Fisk with CRTP, the Coalition for Responsible Transportation Priorities. I want to say that we do support HCOG being the home for the future Regional Climate Committee, and I think it really makes sense and meshes well with the regional transportation planning work that HCOG already does. That said, I think just a comment for each of you as representatives of each of the jurisdictions that, HCOG is clearly going to need, particularly at the beginning, some support for staffing that up and making sure that there's resources available to go after future funding and so on. And so I just want to make sure that everyone is prepared to kind of pitch in at the beginning to provide the resources needed to get the ball rolling. Also want to say that we have commented, as many of you have already heard, that we would like to see the RCAP targets brought into line with the RTP safe and sustainable targets. But even if that shouldn't happen, really want to emphasize the importance of HCOG making decisions based on those more ambitious targets and not walking that back any. So thank you.
And thank you for your comments. I don't see any others up there. And if there's none.
You ready? All right, here. We'll try this again. I move that the HCOG Executive Director Burks moves forward on this plan, and the PAC directs staff to send the comment letter regarding the draft RCAP.
Second.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second, and we'll have a roll call.
Chair Johnson,
Yes.
Mayor Jones,
Yes.
Supervisor Madrone,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Castellano,
Yes.
Councilmember Atkins Salazar,
Yes.
Councilmember Jorgensen,
Yes.
Councilmember West,
Yes.
Councilmember Orr,
Yes.
PAC Member Allstrand.
Yes.
All right.
Thank you. The motion passes. And we come now to the consent calendar. 4 items: approval of the meeting record from August 15th, consultant selection for on-call planning services, consultant selection for the Humboldt County Regional Zero Emission Fleet Transition and Infrastructure Plan, and the Humboldt Transit Authority fiscal year 24-25 LTF claim. Would anybody like to pull anything?
Well, I did have some corrections on the minutes, which I sent to Amy and Beth concerning some motions that were made and the votes were not tallied as unanimous. So I think those were duly noted by staff.
Yeah, I've made those corrections and I will post those in the approved minutes.
Thank you.
Okay, is there any public comment on the consent calendar? See none. We'll entertain a motion.
Motion to approve the consent calendar
I'll second.
with the corrections as identified by Mayor Jones.
Okay. And I'll second that.
Okay, again, a roll call.
All right. Chair Johnson,
Yes.
Mayor Jones,
Yes.
Supervisor Madrone,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Castellano,
Yes.
Councilmember Atkins Salazar,
Yes.
Councilmember Jorgensen,
Yes.
Councilmember West,
Yes.
Councilmember Orr,
Yes.
PAC Member Allstrand.
Yes.
Thank you. Passes. And now, by a motion, we'll reconvene as the HCOG board and approve the PAC recommendations. So do we get a motion?
Move to reconvene.
Second.
Okay. We have, by motion, we vote again.
Chair Johnson,
Yes.
Mayor Jones,
Yes.
Supervisor Madrone,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Castellano,
Yes.
Councilmember Atkins Salazar,
Yes.
Councilmember Jorgensen,
Yes.
Councilmember West,
Yes.
Councilmember Orr.
Yes.
All right.
And thank you again. And thank you for your diligence, Amy. And at this time, we have 2 presentations. The first being the Last Chance Grade presentation with Jamie Mattioli and Liana Winkler Prince from Caltrans.
For me?
Good evening. Thank you for having us here. My name is Jamie Mattioli. I'm corridor manager for Last Chance Grade, and with me is Liana Winkler-Prinz. She'll get up here in a bit. It's great to have this opportunity to share this informational update on the project. So for the next 10 minutes or so, we want to get into, forgive me if you've seen this already, history and context of the project. And Supervisor Madrone has heard about this a lot, so forgive us. And then we'll get into what is the selected alternative. We've now selected an alternative that includes a tunnel. And then what are the next steps for the project? And we're happy to hear any questions and provide answers. So going back to square one on this one, and I'll be very quick because I'm sure a lot of you know this stuff. Just the context of the project is that there's a 3-mile long landslide. This is a site 10 miles south of Crescent City. The bridge at the very bottom is Wilson Creek Bridge, sits about 40 feet above the ocean. The road climbs to about 600 feet as you near the top of the page. North is up, and the dashed lines are landslides. The blue landslide is called a melange. It's an earth flow. It's moving slow. The slopes are pretty low. It moves maybe a couple centimeters a year, and when you drive that section of the road, it's going like this, up and down. And we don't have big structures in that spot. And the ultimate alternative actually leaves that spot alone. And you get to the north spot, those white boundaries are landslides in a broken formation. So you have steeper slopes, you start to see rocks falling from above the road, and there's a number of walls built below the road. And we've built more than 20 walls in the last 20 years. The orange line is showing the coastal erosion. So you have the landslide moving, and then you have this conveyor belt of the waves eating away the toe, and we expect things to get worse with climate change. And we're here in a UNESCO World Heritage Site. It's within the state park. It's within a national park. It's home to sensitive species, this incredible habitat, old growth redwood in the park. And it's the ancestral territory of 5 tribes. So just a bit of the setting. And Caltrans and motorists for decades have experienced landslides and emergency work at this location. This was a relatively small landslide given the scale of Last Chance Grade. We call it the Valentine's Day slide of February 21, shut down the road. On Valentine's Day, I remember there was a couple that was separated. Was that you? Oh my, I'm so sorry. That's not funny. I don't know why I'm laughing. Oh my gosh. So yeah, 8-hour detour from there, right? So there's no detour. We'll get to that in a second. So yeah, this shut down the road, unfortunately, and there was about 40,000 yards of material that had to be removed, and we've since cleaned that up. Here's another look, looking from below. But Caltrans has 2 jobs at Last Chance Grade. One is to keep the highway open and safe. The other is to work towards a long-term solution that addresses this chronic damage and movement and maintenance cost generated by the landslide. Over the last 9 years almost, the road was closed to 2-lane. It was down to 1 lane, so motorists going through there have only known 1 lane. We just received a letter from a 12-year-old girl in Crescent City. So her whole life, she's only known Last Chance Grade was restricted access, and she talked about how, her parents are late coming home from work, driving from the south. It really affects the people up there, as we all know. So there's no detour, as we discussed. If you're in Klamath and the road's closed, it's an 8-hour detour, assuming all these other roads are open. And in the winter, if this thing's closed, there's no guarantee that 199's open or 299's open. And that has major ramifications on the regional economy. A 2018 study was performed, and economists found that it would cost hundreds of millions of dollars if this road was closed for a period of 1 year, and thousands of jobs. So the purpose of our project, the long-term project, is to develop a long-term solution to this instability and potential roadway failure at Last Chance Grade. stakeholder engagement has been so key to the project and the success we've achieved to date. I want to acknowledge Supervisor Madrone for contributing to that. Countless hours with us at Congressman Huffman's stakeholder group, and a number of tours, a number of events, along with many other federal, state, local officials, tribal members, tribal leaders, interest groups, and elected officials. So we have 4 working groups that meet regularly, and as well as we were able to meet with tribes. We've just been fortunate enough to meet with 4 tribes over the last 2 months at their council meetings. And stakeholders have helped us in so many ways, but one of those is to help us select the preferred alternative that we'll talk about. And I just want to highlight Congressman Schiff and Congressman Huffman were just able to tour this site on the 4th. So it's great that Congressman Schiff is aware. You all know he's running for senator, and he understood the issues. He was asking really good engineering questions, really interested in how those walls are built and how the tunnel would be built. So a bit on our project timeline. This is just a truncated timeline of the environmental process starting in 2021, when we were able to, at that time, narrow down our alternatives to the 2 we have moving forward. I'll talk about that in a minute. Fast forward, there's a number of things that have happened. We're now at a point where we've circulated our draft environmental document late last year. We've held our public open house. We've received all of the comments, and we've selected our preferred alternative. That allows us to work through key issues with permitting agencies, working on how to mitigate for the impacts of this project is key. And those decisions will be documented in our final environmental document, which will get us to the design phase in early 2026. And we have a goal of getting to construction on or before 2030. And we hope to meet or beat that one. So I'll talk a bit about alternatives analysis. This image is just to show that we had a broad range of alternatives. There's Crescent City, and if you look down between the letters X and F on that graphic on the right, that's really the area of the landslide that we were just showing. So we had alternatives that went about 11 miles around. Ultimately, all the alternatives were eliminated on the east side, and we worked on 2 alternatives, X and F, that rose to the top, and those were fully studied in our environmental document. Ultimately, we selected the tunnel because it best meets the project's purpose and need. We had an independent panel of geotechnical experts, and they told us that the tunnel alternative is 2 times as likely to meet the performance metrics we were looking for. So that was the key in making that decision for Caltrans. And now I'd like to invite Liana to talk a bit about this alternative, what it looks like, and what are some of the key features. So, Liana.
Thanks, Jamie. I'm Liana, last chance grade project manager, relatively new to the project. I just joined the team in December. So if you have questions about history, Jamie's your guy. I'm more the what's been happening this year. We did select the alternative in June, as Jamie described, and here is a picture of what we're talking about, a tunnel bypass. You can see the arrow there that says US 101. That is the existing alignment. The narrow white line would be the tunnel alignment. There's a north portal at the north end, south portal at the south. You might notice the letters EDAS down there at the south portal. That stands for Engineered Deformation Absorption System. It's a sort of novel design for the south portal since it would span between the earth flow that Jamie was describing and the adjacent broken rock formation. So that's what those letters stand for. And just south of there is some approach embankment earthwork that would have to be done, as well as further south, the operations and maintenance center that would support the tunnel. All right, and here's just another view of more of a map view of the tunnel alternative. And a lot of this is similar information. A couple new things to point out. There's a coastal trail that some of you may have hiked. If you haven't, I highly recommend it there through the Redwood Park. As you can see, the tunnel would essentially be underneath where the coastal trail is located. And let's see. Also in the yellow, with the narrow yellow line, that's also the existing highway alignment. Currently, it's proposed to decommission the existing alignment, recontour it, try to bring it back to as natural a state as possible, and relinquish the lands to parks. That is the current plan. And let's see, what else do we got here that's new information? I think that's, very important is the current design for the tunnel has a separated pedestrian and bike pathway. It's a sort of elevated pathway. We are intending to do a value analysis of the tunnel cross section that we'll be looking at many things, but one of those is definitely the ped and bike access and safety features of the tunnel design. And then the next few slides are just some sort of graphics of what this would look like. So here's the proposed south tunnel portal and approach. Similarly, from the north end. And then here's a graphic of what we call it the OMC, the Operations and Maintenance Center. And just going over some cost and impacts data that we have. It is an expensive project. In 2031 dollars, we're looking at roughly $2 to $2.5 billion. Annual maintenance costs are also significant, as you can see, several million dollars in 2031 dollars. Construction timeline, we're looking at about 6 to 8 years. But I think Jamie mentioned we're trying to look as innovative ways to accelerate our schedule. It reduces impacts overall to do things in an accelerated manner. And also there at the bottom, we have some statistics on the excavated material volumes. Those are also significant. We're looking at about 1 million cubic yards of material that would need to be excavated. And that equates to a significant number of truck trips. So that's another thing we're looking into, is how to best come up with that sort of program of how to move these spoils around, where best to store them, can they be reused, etc. And then there on the right just describes lane closures during construction. Because this is a bypass alternative, it's actually anticipated to be relatively minimal traffic impacts to the existing alignment. And then the slides for environmental impacts. And you can see here that there's been a lot of work done trying to capture impacts of all sorts, environmental wise. Of course, high on people's minds is tree impacts. So this graphic up top shows very large trees. That's how, and we've defined that as trees with diameters of 4 foot or greater. And coastal redwoods are on people's minds. This would take down 16 coastal redwood trees. And then also you can see the statistics for Doug fir, Sitka spruce, and western hemlock. So those are the numbers on the trees. I did want to mention we're developing our mitigation plan right now. We expect it will take a lot of time, a lot of coordination. As far as the trees go, we do intend to the extent possible, tribes are very interested in using the trees for cultural purposes. So that's a big element of mitigation we're working on. Cal Poly Humboldt is very interested in using this as a research opportunity to look at tree roots, which is actually pretty fascinating, because in order to do studies like that, you inherently damage the tree. So this is kind of an opportunity in that way. Trying to just make the best of the situation. I just wanted to kind of mention that. There on the bottom just describes acres of impacts to different types of forests. So for late successional redwood forest, for example, we're looking at about 1 acre of permanent impacts. And then similarly, it has the statistics for a couple other forest types. And then I'm going to hand it back to Jamie. Thank you.
So I'll just really quickly talk about some of the next steps. So again, we're working to finish our final environmental document by the end of 2025. And I apologize for the language on the slide. 0 phase is our environmental phase. So working to get through that. Liana mentioned we're looking for innovative ways to accelerate the construction and the design. And one of those methods is to bring on a contractor, hire them as soon as we can, ideally second quarter next year. That's that CMGC process. And allows us to hire the most qualified builder. So someone with tunnel experience is what we're looking for. And then the key steps are working with agencies, identify proposals to mitigate for the project impacts. And there's a number of steps in design I won't touch on. But with that, I'd like to open it up for any questions and answers. And again, thank you so much for your attention on this.
Questions? Yes.
Thank you so much for your presentation. This fascinated me ever since I heard you were going to actually build a tunnel, because I don't know how often that occurs in California anymore. And I was curious to know what the length of the tunnel actually is in terms of miles.
1.1 mile, 6,000 feet.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And it is rare. Yeah, I think the last tunnel Caltrans constructed was 2013 Caldecott Fourth Bore in the Bay Area. So yeah, it's been a while.
You have something?
Yeah, thank you for the presentation. I was curious about the ongoing maintenance component. Are there risks or concerns about if that funding isn't secured, or how might the funding be secured to kind of guarantee ongoing maintenance for periods of time?
Yeah, are there risks to ongoing maintenance, meaning if there are issues, are there concerns about being able to keep the road open and safe?
Well,
is that the nature
I
of the
guess
question?
just what happens if there isn't funding to maintain it, or
right. There's a very robust program, the federal emergency response program. If there are events and damage out there, Caltrans is able to very quickly get the funding it needs, hire contractors, and perform work. So the maintenance work is it's very quick, and there's streamlined processes for environmental. So we're able to maintain and keep it open while we're seeking funding. But that is a concern that full funding for the alternative F does not materialize on the current schedule, and it would just delay the work we do, and delays come with risks of, all sorts of things could happen there, like redoing work, new regulations, increases due to just inflation could be one of the biggest increases we experience on the project. So yeah, it's a major concern that funding would not be achieved in time. The maintenance will be performed regardless. Yeah. I hope that answers that.
So I heard the talk about the EDAS, the movement, but also during the part of the maintenance, in my head, I envision like load moment sensors and check earth movement. And so you kind of have a 24/7 picture of what's happening in and around the tunnel too at the same time.
Absolutely. Yeah, if I could just share a bit. So tunnels have all sorts of safety systems, and Devil's Slide Tunnel, Tom Lantos Tunnel down near Half Moon Bay, for example, there's crews around the clock, 3 people operating and watching a SCADA system similar to you might see for a water plant or something like that. There's video cameras. They see everything, all the traffic that's going on. They could control communications within the tunnel, so they could send messages, control lights, and they're monitoring for the emergency response systems. If there's a fire, automated systems come on, and operators are able to monitor that, manage that. There's emergency response plans, performing exercises with local emergency responders. There's all sorts of systems and processes involved in maintaining a tunnel and operating a tunnel.
Thank you. I don't see anything from Mr. Orr. Well, thank you very much. You covered a lot of territory, but you gave us the information, and I think that's why we don't have questions. You covered it well.
Awesome.
Oh, yes.
Thank you, Jamie, and I just want to thank you for your diligence on this project for years, and also Congressman Huffman for pulling together the stakeholder group. This has not been an easy process trying to figure out the best alternatives, and there's never the perfect alternative, but I really appreciate the due diligence on your part and everybody at Caltrans, because this is really a huge project, and we got a long way to go, but I want to thank you for your efforts. So thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good evening. And we have another presentation.
All right, I can introduce this one.
Okay, go for it.
Yeah, this is the Blue Lake Housing video. This was produced with REAP funds. So the REAP program is really drawn to a close at this point. This is one of our last products we received. So we're happy to share it with you. Yeah, so we probably won't have too many more presentations with REAP funding, but yeah, we're happy to get this one and share it with everybody.
Blue Lake has a feel that is inviting for all the reasons that a small town is inviting.
Blue Lake is centered around the Bottawat River, also known as the Mad River.
A rural community that's tucked back into the trees.
We love recreation. We're known for our sunshine, our river, arts and culture.
There is a real strong sense of community here.
The Blue Lake community is just such a wonderful gem, and I think for any family or for anyone that really enjoys being in the outdoors and really enjoys that community feel where neighbors come out and help one another, this is a wonderful place to be.
Blue Lake, it's a great place to live, but it's also a community with some struggles. I think we can overcome them. It takes dialogue, it takes acknowledgement though of really where we've come from and where we're going.
People who are coming to Blue Lake and residing here of late have been retirees.
Yes, retirees are coming here, but what keeps a town alive is young people and families, you know. And that's where I think the big challenge is right now.
I think we are going to dry up if we don't have families move in.
It is a challenge, I think, for people to buy a house here.
Being able to bring in affordable housing into Blue Lake is critical to fill that middle ground that our community needs.
The city used to be a lot more than what it is now. Even in the short amount of time that I've been here, businesses that I enjoyed going to are gone now.
Blue Lake traditionally has been an industrial town. We were a logging community. We had a lot of young families in the community that worked in the mills and provided a lot of economy and investment in Blue Lake. We had stores, we had markets, people circulated their dollars within our own community footprint.
We raised kids here, we had families here, but there was a lot of changes of life that happened.
The biggest change was kind of the downturn of the logging and timber industry, and that hit our community really hard.
My sense of it is mills automated. There was less people being employed, and those that could move did.
A lot of those young families had to relocate to find new jobs. Those were the same people that were investing in the community, whether it was through volunteerism or recreation or just general economics. It impacted our community a lot.
Back in the 60s and 70s, when we had this larger population, we were able to sustain the type of businesses that are no longer here. This includes multiple places of nightlife. It includes a couple places to have breakfast, lunch, and dinner, which we don't have now. We're not yet back to the critical mass that can sustain these services and this commerce, these jobs.
As people moved in from out of the area, they were working out of the area, they were still shopping out of the area, and those dollars and that economy wasn't replaced with that loss of the industry. And as we start to see our demographics trend towards an older demographic, we're starting to really see those impacts.
We have houses that are on the market for $500,000 or $600,000, but we're kind of missing that middle housing area where we have affordable, quality housing that families can afford.
There's a lot of stigma when people look at affordable housing. When you look at low income or affordable housing, these are already the people that are in Blue Lake.
You don't necessarily see low income. You know, low income could be a first-year teacher at a school. Low income could be your post office worker. It could be anyone.
We're not this elite community. We've always been a blue-collar community. Like I said before, with the timber industry, our dads, they worked in the mills. You know, they came home with sawdust on their clothes. These are our people, and we need to find a space to provide opportunity. And affordable housing is a critical part of that. If people can't afford to live in these communities, what does our community become?
Being able to own your own home or your own property is a dream. It's my own family's dream. It's a shame that we can't. And, you know, even talking to my own parents, my dad has this antiquated view of what, you know, well, you just save up and you just buy a home, but it's not like that anymore, unfortunately. And even though we have 2 working adults in our household, 2 working adults isn't the same as what 1 working adult may have been in the 1950s. So things have changed, and it's difficult.
I'm a multi-generational Blue Laker who's had the benefit of having housing handed down to me. I could not afford the house I live in now. If I had to go and buy that house, I could not afford to live in Blue Lake, and I think I do pretty well for myself, but this community is outpacing people like me, and I think I'm a pretty good addition to the community. I try pretty hard and try to give back and do good things, but that's where we're at. You know, if we don't do something, we're gonna lose the people that are probably our greatest value.
I think affordable housing could be something that would benefit everybody, not just families with children, but even our seniors struggle to make rent sometimes or afford their place.
Quarter-pound Miller all beef. I'm probably a paycheck away from being homeless, like most people I know. I am lucky enough to have an apartment. My rent has been raised 3 or 4 times since I've been there. And it really prevents my family from being able to live nearby. It's scary. If it goes up again, I don't want to have to raise the price of my hot dogs.
With the decrease in families, we have declining enrollment at a greater degree than maybe other schools might see it. So that definitely affects not only student population, but funding coming in the school and our ability to offer different programs.
For the school and for the city, sometimes there's a challenge in just not having enough resources here to be able to do what we know we can do.
Anytime you can get another 40 or 50 kids into a school that has the capacity for it, you're going to see a revenue bump, which means more resources for the kids, more programs for the kids, and better outcomes for them as students. Same with coaching youth sports. Little League here is struggling to field teams, so we need kids. It's struggling to find coaches and umpires to be able to keep this league sustainable. And there's other civic groups here in town too that would benefit by having more people and younger people here.
With the aging demographics here in town, I've noticed that there's fewer people volunteering at the fire department. These things are going to disappear. I don't know what's going to happen to the volunteer fire department if we don't have the younger community going into it.
I'm a member of the volunteer fire department, and it's difficult as we see our call volumes continue to increase. We're seeing our volunteer numbers decrease.
The challenges that I see in the community are food insecurities, affordable housing, as well as public transportation. So Blue Lake is a food desert. That means there's no grocery store in town.
It's a real concern. Me especially, it's looking at kind of what our future looks like. We need to have additional housing. We need to provide opportunity for people to be in our community. Blue Lake's not a gated community. We're not an elite community. We're a city, and that balance of demographics is really critical for our success. I absolutely feel hopeful about Blue Lake. I see us moving in a very sustainable and positive direction. So one of the big projects that the city of Blue Lake is looking at is an affordable housing project. And I, for one, think it's probably the most critical project that the city has and that the city can focus on.
I'm excited to see that Blue Lake is trying to increase housing here. You know, as a renter myself, it's my dream to be able to buy a house or some property out here. I think it's really important and critical for bringing people in. I've talked to so many families and different people who would love to live out here. There just isn't the availability.
I would love to see our Blue Lake community be able to bring in more housing, which will then bring in more businesses.
We need more businesses for people that live here to work at.
I feel really confident and really comfortable that the vision that we're putting forward for future investment does all of that.
Here in the Powers Creek District, opportunities here. The city is bending over backwards to let growth happen.
When I first realized I wanted to start low and slow as a brick and mortar, Blue Lake made it clear that they wanted to see me succeed. Their first response was, what can we do to help you achieve your goals and in turn help our residents? And I knew right away, yeah, Blue Lake is where this is going to happen.
With what little growth we've had, it's brought nothing but positive results. And I think with the plan the city has in mind for new homes, new businesses, I think that would just spur that positive growth even more.
So the Powers Creek District has laid pretty dormant for a number of years. The city owns about 27 acres in the district that's undeveloped or is slated for redevelopment. Currently we have some fairly large swaths of land that are open and really have been sitting ready for someone to invest for a number of years. We're seeing other property owners out here in the district that are looking to reinvest into new development. There's talks about an RV park and campground, so transitioning these old industrial sites over to something that's more recreation centric. There's talks about a sports complex possibly coming in, and just a lot of really good interest and excitement about the future of Blue Lake and the future of the Powers Creek District.
The development plan that I'm familiar with in the Powers Creek District makes the most sense to be able to accomplish the goals of a community quickly and efficiently.
There's the idea out there and a plan out there to have live workspaces. That would be incredible.
I think transitioning our thought process from just this focus on industry and manufacturing and production over to these live-work environments, it really creates a more holistic and sustainable approach to development. When we look at our traditional development pattern in Blue Lake, it really was that small grocer living above his store or the manufacturer living above the retail shop. It's what Blue Lake has always been. And I think we've just kind of lost sight of that as we've started to become more of this kind of bedroom community.
I really feel like it's the best opportunity we have to provide that shot in the arm, providing the most benefit to Blue Lake.
I see a future where our school is full again. I see a future where, kids are playing baseball, where we have Little League teams again, where we have more kids and families riding horses in our arena and enjoying our bike park, and more people living in our community. That's what Blue Lake was always about.
All right. Well, we have HCOG staff and PAC member reports, beginning with our own Executive Director Burke.
Thank you. Okay, quick staff announcement. It's Stevie's last day tomorrow before he takes his educational leave. He didn't want any fanfare today. I tried to drag him along, but he was on Zoom. If he might, I think he plugged off. But yeah, we have a plan. As you know, during the consent agenda, you approved the on-call consultant, so that's part of kind of filling in for Stevie while he's out. And in addition, we'll have a Civic Spark Fellow starting at the end of the month. So we have some plan in place, but there's no replacement for Stevie. So thank you for all his efforts, and look forward to seeing him in about a year. So also we did receive a SAFE report. CHP was out doing supplemental patrols. So I have a report. I know those are always appreciated. So they did 56 supplemental patrols during this grant cycle. And actually, I don't see on here exactly how many months they covered during those 56 patrols, but those patrols were on highways 96 and 36. During that time, they issued 53 citations. They gave 51 verbal warnings. They drove 12,600 miles, and they provided, this is the most important statistics from for the SAFE perspective, they provided aid to 199 motorists during those patrols. So as we always hear when we get these updates, the money's put to good use, and I think just happy to get that. And then the last announcement I have is that the Ride Humboldt branding that we've been working towards is finally live. I think you all should have received in your inbox a little bit of information that we'll be kind of launching this at the North Country Fair this weekend. So HCOG will be supporting HTA to have a booth at the fair. We'll have a bus there as well. And the mascot for this is Busquatch. So we'll have actually a live mascot for part of the time. But please feel free to stop by. That would be wonderful to see all of you, just really give it a good launch. We're really hoping to hit some of our increased transit ridership targets through this marketing. And just as a reminder, this is all paid for through a TERSIP grant that HTA received, and HCOG is a partner with them on that, so we are helping specifically with all this marketing effort. So has anyone, just out of curiosity, did anyone not see the video, kind of the photo compilation that came out? If it's about 2 minutes, and we have got it teed up to share, but it may have already landed on your inbox, or you've all not looking familiar to everyone. Okay, we'll just give it a look. I think it's 2 minutes long. It's pretty brief, but we're excited that it's live. Yeah, it came out really good. Huh? Yeah, these materials are really turning out really up in the level here. So, all right, that's it. That's it for me. Thank you.
Any questions for? Yes.
Can you please repeat the statistic about, you mentioned that they, CHP had provided aid to a number of citizens?
199.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
That's pretty good for one month. Okay. Yes.
Fantastic video. I think it's wonderful. I just wanted to pass on. I got one comment, only one comment from a constituent about the video. She was concerned it didn't really show senior citizens very much. There was one older person early in the video, and also wheelchair access. Just something to think about in the future, but I don't want to criticize at all. I think it's a magnificent video, but it was just a little feedback I wanted to share.
Yeah, I really do appreciate that. We have more videos coming, so it's always good to get that feedback so we can be sure to highlight in the future and make sure we're balancing everything out. But thank you. Oh, good.
All right, well, we come to the Caltrans report.
I have an update, but I see that Jeff Pimentel's on the line, so I want to give him the opportunity to go first.
Hello, everyone. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
All right. I apologize. I'm not there in person or even showing my face on video. I had an engagement I needed to be at this evening, so I'm in my car and didn't want to bore you guys with my boring background. So anyway, thanks for having me, and just wanted to give everyone a quick update on the Indianola Undercrossing construction project. So for anyone that's driven through the corridor recently, or at least in the past 3 weeks or so, you'll have noticed that we now have detoured the northbound traffic over to the east. And the location of the northbound traffic is the future location of the northbound on and off ramps. So as you see that, you'll also drive, those will not go away, and you'll drive on those at some point in the future once the project's constructed to merge off and on the highway there. As of about 3 weeks ago, we had about 60% of the column supported embankment columns in place, and those have continued to be installed. So I do know that we are higher than that now, but I do not have an update on that. We are expecting to complete the installation of the columns this calendar year. We also removed the existing northbound lanes throughout the project limits so that we can continue with the column installation in those areas where the pavement was removed. As you've noticed, and if you've driven through there, every location where you see a little orange tag in the ground is going to be receiving one of those columns. So I believe we're installing upwards of about 7,000 columns in total. So quite a few of those. Let's see here. The contractor's also targeting to begin installation of the structure foundation potentially before the end of the calendar year as well. And for the structure foundation, the first order of work would be to install cast and drill hole piles, essentially a steel shell that we placed in the ground with a rebar cage and then concrete poured in. We have I believe we have 60 of them at each abutment, so 120 piles will be placed approximately 90 feet in depth, and those will be 2 foot in diameter. So we're hoping that that gets started this year. We are not expecting construction to come to a complete halt as it did last winter. Last winter, we didn't have our base material down yet, and we were essentially working on the bay mud. And for anyone knows, with a lot of weight on soil with a high groundwater table and susceptible to kind of liquefaction and pumping of water, makes for a pretty poor construction site. So now that we've got our base material for the most part down, we have a better construction service to work on. So in between, I think, rainfall events, the contractor is hoping to continue doing some work. I would expect it to be at a much slower pace, but hopefully not a standstill like last winter. Next year, we also will expect to shift where the existing southbound lanes are today. Those will move immediately adjacent to where the detour northbound lanes are currently. So that will happen at some point early next year as well. You'll also have noticed that the southbound 101 left turn to eastbound Indianola has been closed. And if you remember, last year we closed the westbound Indianola to southbound 101 movement in the interest of safety, visibility, restrictions. And so we had closed that. Now we've reached the point where we're doing a significant amount of work in the median. We have more K-rail out there that's obstructing views for both crossing vehicles as well as approaching vehicles. So also in the interest of safety for those vehicles, staff, both from the contractor and Caltrans staff out on site, we've now come to that point where we need to close that movement. We don't have a timeline on when that will open again, but I would expect it to be closed for most of the remaining duration of construction. Let's see here. I think that was essentially, one other thing. We recently also started work down at the Airport Road intersection. As you've noticed, we've done some widening and we're doing some night work currently with single lane closure through that area, where we're adding some width to the roadway. And I'm not sure if everyone's aware of this. I probably shared this at a much earlier board meeting when we were going through the design and delivering the project, but there will actually be 4 lanes as you approach the intersection at Airport Road to increase the storage for those vehicles that are gonna will be stop controlled by the half signal. And then 3 of those lanes will continue through the intersection with dropping back down to 2 as we approach and get past the mid-city and Harper Ford property intersection there. So that widening that we're doing, the additional pavement, is related to that. Last thing I wanted to mention, I'm not sure if Jamie and Liana are still in the room, but if Liana's there still, I did want to give a special shout out to her. So all the exciting CSE work that we're doing, that is the first time Caltrans has done it in Caltrans history for any transportation project. Liana, prior to coming to project management, was in geotech and had a huge part in helping to design and put forward that CSE portion of the design into our project. So if Liana's still there, you got a special person there in the crowd that was integral in getting that very cool construction method incorporated into the project. So anyway, with that, that's all I have, and I'm available to answer any questions anyone may have.
Oh, thank you. You hit a lot of area there, and again, it was informative. And do we have any questions for, yes, Supervisor Madrone?
Sorry to ask so many questions tonight, but this is such great information. Thank you, Jeff. So the styrofoam blocks that were stored over on Highway 299 for the last couple of years, some of them caught fire. It's been cleaned up, and I saw a lot of them leaving the area again. I had heard at one point they were supposed to be part of the construction package. Are they not related to Indianola?
No, those are part of the project. Unfortunately, a number of them burned, and we had to clean that up. But we decided to move them to another location. So they are still part of the project. We are actually going to be acquiring more of them. I believe the contractor has already acquired the additional ones we need. Those were from another project that Caltrans had, and they were removed and no longer going to be needed, and they were just going to be disposed of. And so in the interest of not being wasteful and finding some savings to the project cost, we decided to bring those and truck them up here to use them for this project. Unfortunately, the timing of when those were removed and no longer needed on a former project further south, and when we were going to need these for construction, there is a duration of time there that, between probably going on almost 3+ years ago. So we will get next year to the point where we're going to start using them. They are still part of the plan. The purpose really behind that is with the soft soils that we have, we call those essentially lightweight fill. So we achieve a similar, a certain volume of fill in our embankment, but at a much lower weight per surface area for the low kind of bearing capacity that we have at the soil out there. So it'll help it helped with some of the foundations, the depth of the columns that we'll need in terms of reducing those, because the weight of the fill in those areas will be less with the foam blocks versus using conventional fill such as soil.
Thank you for that. Inquiring minds wanted to know.
It's a good question.
Councilmember West.
Yeah, just a quick one about the trail. We've enjoyed watching the trail as we ride down 101 and see all the changes that regularly take place. Can you give us any updates on the trail and especially the railroad bridge and what you're doing with that?
Yeah, so the trail's moving along. I actually just had a meeting with Hank Seaman today on another project, but I know that they were planning to complete it. I believe their schedule was to complete it by the end of this year. I don't know what the exact timeline is. I wouldn't be surprised just with the scale of the project if there was some minor tidy up they have to do going into 2025. I know a question we've been getting a lot about that trail is, will you be able to get to it from our Indianola project? We do have a connection from Indianola that we will be constructing as part of the Indianola project over to the trail. So if you are coming westbound Indianola, you'll be able to connect into Bay Trail, head north or south. So that's an exciting, great feature that'll be part of that. In terms of the railroad bridge, the county is, I guess, more or less temporarily going to be utilizing the old railroad trestle to cross the slough in that location. Another project that we have that is actually one of the ones I'm managing as well is the Eureka Slough Bridges Replacement Project, which I'm fairly certain I've probably mentioned at a board meeting in the past. And so that one is currently in the project approval environmental document phase. We are planning to we're targeting a draft environmental document in the spring of next year for that project. And that project will redirect the trail onto Eureka Slough Bridges, both in the northbound and southbound directions with separated pathways for pedestrians and bikes, and have a physical barrier that would stop a vehicle from going through it. I'm not certain if it would be concrete. I'm sure it will be concrete in some nature, but maybe have some sort of a steel component to it as well. But that is our plan once we build the replacement for the bridges. The target construction year for that project is in fiscal year 29-30. So I'd expect probably around 2030 is when we begin construction. And that is quite an undertaking. I think we're estimating anywhere between 4 to 5 years for construction. So in that time frame is when the trail alignment would redirect over to the Eureka Slough Bridges. So you would still get the same connectivity. We'll actually plan to loop the trail down under the structures to be able to get onto the trails that the city of Eureka built on the target side of the slough. So we expect it to actually be a little better than what it'll be once this is done, but nonetheless, very exciting to have that infrastructure in place for pedestrians and cyclists and people that just want to get outside and do some recreation.
Thank you.
I could just,
yes.
Mayor Jones had asked us a question earlier, or emailed a question about the trail as well, and so we have it on our list to reach out to Deputy Director Hank Seaman to ask him to come and give a full presentation, because I think there's enough progress that there's probably good milestones to report on. So expect that at a future meeting pending his availability.
Okay, thank you. Any board member reports?
I just want to mention that the proclamation for the Week Without Driving is going to be on our Blue Lake City Council agenda, so thank you for that. We do have a lot of need in our town for having this happen, so we'll be passing that at our Tuesday meeting.
Okay. Go.
The city of Eureka approved its bike plan at the last meeting. So, look for continued forward movement with bike planning and bike trail planning in Eureka.
Good. Awesome. Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Did you finish your presentation?
I have one thing to add, but I can wait until afterward. Thank you.
Okay, great. So For those that don't know, the Bay Trail project started 38 years ago when I hired Jen Rice, and the two of us put together the first analysis of possible routes to get around the bay. So, these things don't happen quickly, but sometimes a little small project turns into a really wonderful big thing many, many years later. And also, I'd be happy, along with my executive director, Elaine Hogan, at some point to provide a Great Redwood Trail Agency update to this group as well, because there's a lot of projects happening in that regard, and the Bay Trail is certainly a part of all of that. And there's planning going on for the trail from Eureka to CR and many other pieces to it. At any rate, that's something for the future. I also wanted to say, this is impressive. I mean, this list of Caltrans project, 160 or some, 120 or more projects, it's just phenomenal. I wanted to pass on something, and I shared this with Tom Fitzgerald. I am aware of the work that's happening and why it's happening on Highway 299. And it's really good work. I mean, it's stuff that's going to create long-term fixes to many very unstable areas. But I'm getting a massive amount of calls from the community about the doubling of time it's taking to get from Willow Creek to Arcata, especially for those that commute every day. And there's also the issue that if an emergency vehicle is coming through, they have to stop as well. They cannot, there is no process to be able to get them through if it's an ambulance or a fire truck or whatever. So they're also delayed, which is a very significant issue. And again, I very much value the work that's happening. So Tom said he was going to take a look at the total set of delays and different things. And I guess there's some sort of standard around trying to not make the impact too large, too great, or whatever. And he was going to get back to me on that. But I felt it important to share that from constituents. They understand the importance of the repairs, but when people are spending all that time at red lights, it gets old, and they're certainly telling me all about it. But at any rate, I want to thank Caltrans for the incredible efforts they're making. I wish we had the same amount of money to work on our county roads, but we do have a measure on the ballot in November, Measure O, for a 1-cent sales tax, and I know it's a horrible time to try and get any tax measures. Many of the cities have some, Trinidad, Arcata, Eureka, Fortuna. It's a lot. But as I've said many times, we're already spending the money on our car repairs. And so while it might be in addition to sales, we're spending the money on shocks, alignments, tires, everything else, let alone the dangers of dodging all the potholes on county roads. They're a mess. And so we got to turn that corner. So we are going to be developing a campaign around supporting Measure O and educating the community about that. We've been doing a lot of road shows with Tom Matson from Public Works and Sean Quincy from CIO's office to try and educate people. But if you have any questions, please let me share with you what I know about all of it. But I hope that we can really start turning a corner on our county road system, because it's a mess, frankly. So that's all I have.
All right. Well, we will return to Tasha.
Thanks. No, I appreciate the comment, and I always, it's fine to reiterate, and I'll take it back. Everything that's said here, I try to pass it along. So thanks. I just wanted to say that the draft fiscal year 25-26 Sustainable Transportation Planning Grant Program guidelines, they've been released for a 30-day public review. And I just wanted to say that there's a lot of important improvements to the contracting options for Native American tribal governments. There are increased set-asides for the tribes, and the local match requirement has been removed for tribes. So it's a really big deal. There'll be a call for applications this fall, and we'll be hosting workshops and engaging with the tribes. And it's the final round of climate adaptation planning funding. So thank you.
Thank you. And I think with that, we have reached adjournment. Thank you.